They stopped him from boarding, questioned his ticket, and even called for backup, all while ignoring the fact that he held the keys to a contract worth $48 million with their airline. Nothing out of the ordinary for Marcus Donovan. That morning, his suit was perfectly pressed, and his crisp white shirt collar sat neatly around his neck. He walked through Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport like someone used to early mornings and a string of meetings. In his left hand, he carried a dark leather garment bag. In his right, a first-class ticket to San Francisco. He was headed to the West Sustainability and Food Summit, where at 58 years old, he was scheduled to deliver the opening speech. Marcus had followed this routine countless times. He wasn't the type to draw attention. He valued efficient discretion. But that morning, something felt off as soon as he reached Gate 17. The boarding line wasn't yet formed. A few passengers lingered nearby, sipping coffee and scrolling through their phones. Marcus approached the counter, gave a polite nod to the young woman at the gate, and handed over his ticket. Instead of scanning it immediately, she glanced up at him, then looked back slowly, a kind of look that suggested uncertainty about whether to spark a conversation or remain silent. Marcus stood still, calm and composed, his eyes betraying no urgency. "This line is for premium passengers only," she said in a tone that hardly fit the situation. "I know," Marcus replied evenly. After a brief pause, she scanned the ticket, but then her hand lingered over the scanner without pressing the button. Instead, she turned to him again and said, "I need to see some form of identification." Marcus tilted his head ever so slightly. "Normally, they don't require an ID for ticket scanning. Is there a problem?" She hesitated before adding, "It's just a security measure." Both of them knew there was no rule that forced him to present an ID at the gate, but she did it anyway. He reached into his inner pocket, produced his wallet, and handed her his driver's license. She held it as if she weren't quite sure what to do with it, then placed it clumsily on the counter. "Please wait right here." Marcus glanced. At his ticket, his name, Marcus Donovan, was printed clearly. He said nothing. The gate agent stepped a few paces away and whispered something to someone in a dark uniform. A short while later, a security officer approached. Marcus had experienced situations like this before, rare enough, but enough to know the drill. The sudden switch from professionalism to suspicion, the moment when someone decides he doesn't belong, not because of anything he had said or done, but simply because he didn't fit the expected image of a first-class passenger. The security officer didn't ask any questions. He stood silently beside Marcus, scrutinizing him as though checking items off a risk assessment list. Without a hint of confrontation, Marcus backed away from the gate and moved to the side, away from the boarding line. He wasn't about to argue or raise his voice. Instead, he took his phone out of his pocket and placed a call. It rang once, twice. "Lily, it's me. I need you to pull up the catering contract we signed with Skywave Airlines 2 weeks ago," he said quietly. "Right away. I'm at Gate 17, came the reply. "I'm staying on the line." Keeping his focus straight ahead, Marcus showed no sign of emotion or irritation. The gate agent, noticing he was still there, leaned towards the microphone on the counter and explained, "We're handling a minor issue here, folks. Thanks for your patience." Yet no one was exactly patient. A man in a grey sweater leaned over and muttered, "Is he causing trouble or something?" Marcus heard him, but didn't look back. Inside the terminal, tension began to ripple through the crowd. Behind the counter, the agent, whose name was Rachel, now appeared increasingly nervous, her fingers hovering over the scanner. Her colleague, Mia, leaned in. "Is there really a problem?" "He says he's in first class," Mia remarked, checking the ticket. "His ticket confirms it," Rachel insisted, though her tone wavered. "It just doesn't seem right." At that moment, the security officer continued to stand by Marcus, who remained all business. Meanwhile, another call interrupted the silence. Marcus stepped a few paces aside to answer. The steady voice of Lily returned. "I've alerted the regional vice president. I also included Jack Robinson, the head of food service integration. On their side..." "Thanks," Marcus murmured softly. "Keep me posted." He ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket, the ticket still in hand, as if he were waiting for an elevator. This call wasn't a complaint, it was a signal. Marcus Donovan didn't always wear tailored suits or fly first class. He had grown up in a modest neighborhood of Baltimore, in a small house with creaky floors and busy mornings. His mother, Denise, worked in the produce section of a local grocery store, and his father, Robert, shifted between night shifts at a factory and weekend gigs fixing neighbors' cars. They never had much, but there was always food on the table, and Marcus learned early on that the way you present yourself matters. At 15, he would wake up at the crack of dawn on Saturdays to help his mother sort crates of fruits and vegetables before the store opened. That was when he learned to tell if a peach was ripe by touch, to spot a bruised apple from afar, and most importantly, to really communicate with people. Not just talk to them, but actually connect. At 23, after graduating from a local university with a degree in agricultural business and having $330,000 in his account, he launched a roadside fruit and vegetable stand just outside Baltimore. He had no employees, just a borrowed truck, a tent, and enough determination to sell sweet corn like it was pure gold. The turning point came in his 30s, when he spotted a gap that no one else was filling. Sustainably grown, locally sourced. Food products that could meet the demands of major supermarket chains without compromising quality. Not boutique, not farmer's market fare, but real, properly grown food delivered quickly. And that's how Global Foods Donovan was born. Starting in a rented garage with only one delivery route and a laptop that crashed twice a week, he negotiated deals directly with farms across the mid-Atlantic and slowly built a solid network. It took nearly 15 years before his company earned a seat at the national table. Today, Global Foods Donovan supplies more than 30 upscale supermarket chains, several universities, and more recently, Skywave Airlines. The airline had reached out to him. They needed to reinvent their in-flight meals after a string of dismal reviews and disappointing customer feedback. Marcus didn't pitch with theatrics. He listened first and then proposed his plan. Seasonal, product rotations, direct farm to airline supply, and packaging that cut waste in half. Marcus, however, never forgot his roots. He didn't plaster his office with awards or hang plaques in the lobby. In his Baltimore headquarters, you'd see framed photos of his original fruit stand and walls covered with thank you notes from local farmers. While his assistant Lily handled the logistics, Marcus managed the relationships. Drama wasn't his style, so when the gate agent at JFK ended up scanning more of his face than his ticket, and when the security officer treated him like a potential problem rather than a paying customer, it wasn't merely an inconvenience, it was a reminder. A reminder that no matter how many contracts you sign or how many flights you help supply, some people only see what they expect to see, and when you don't fit that picture, they begin to doubt. But Marcus didn't need to raise his voice to prove his worth. His actions over a lifetime spoke louder than words. That call he made at Gate 17 wasn't the start of a conflict. It was his way of giving the airline an opportunity to quietly fix their mistake. Because although Marcus Donovan believed in grace, he also believed in holding people to high standards. Yet, to Rachel at the gate, he was just another name on a ticket she'd decided not to let through. Rachel was in her early 30s, new to the position after a recent transfer from a smaller regional airport, determined to prove herself. She had been given strict instructions: maintain order, follow protocol, and never let anyone overstep the limits. But what she lacked was the experience and intuition to read a person or a situation without jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, passengers began lining up. A man in a dark blue pullover with Bluetooth headphones fidgeted near the front, while a woman with a floral patterned bag stood behind him, eyeing the delay. Rachel adjusted the microphone on her uniform and muttered something into it about needing reinforcement. She glanced again at Marcus, who remained composed, yet clearly out of place. Mia leaned in, whispering, "Do you know who he is?" "Of course," Rachel replied uncertainly. "He's Marcus Donovan. I saw his company's name on the supplier list last week. The new contract with Skywave," Mia explained. Rachel's stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" "Yes, he runs global. Foods Donovan, they're one of our key suppliers." Rachel's mouth went dry as she looked again at Marcus standing unmoved, ticket still in his hand, without an angry word or a sign of confrontation. "Maybe we should just let him board now," Mia suggested softly. But Rachel panicked. "No, if we do that right away, it makes it look like we—" Before she could finish, a voice came through her earpiece. "Rachel, I need a status update on the hold at Gate 17. We're now showing a delay." She froze. "I'm handling a passenger issue. It's under control." The supervisor's tone was anything but reassured. "Make sure it is. We've got executives boarding this morning. No surprises." As Rachel struggled to steady her trembling hands, she looked once more at Marcus, his calm presence, making her feel smaller by the second. Behind the counter, Mia wanted to apologize on her behalf, but just then a beep sounded from the boarding gate. Another passenger stepped through. A man in khakis glanced back and asked, "What's with the delay?" Rachel's voice had dissolved into silence. Then Marcus stepped forward, not toward the counter, but toward the glass wall overlooking the tarmac. Standing with his hands clasped behind his back, he watched luggage carts roll by. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't anxious. He was letting time work in his favor. Meanwhile, Rachel watched time tick by as the people in charge hurried into action. Up in an office high above the terminal, overlooking the runway and New York skyline, Claire Reynolds was midway through her coffee and a quarterly operations report when her office phone rang. She rarely took calls from unknown numbers, but this one had been transferred twice and marked urgent by her assistant. "This is Claire," she answered. "Hi, Claire. It's Lily on behalf of Marcus Donovan, CEO of Global Foods Donovan. We've been alerted to an incident involving Mr. Donovan at Gate 17, came the measured response. Claire straightened in her seat. "What kind of incident?" Lily's professional tone continued. "Your staff appears to have denied his boarding despite his valid first-class ticket. We fear this could escalate." Claire didn't waste any time asking for details. She had seen Marcus's name enough times to know what was at stake. Skywave had just finalized their supply, contract for the coming fiscal year, and Global Foods. Donovan wasn't just any supplier, they were the supplier. They were meant to help reinvent the airline's entire in-flight dining experience after a disastrous social media campaign had exposed their frozen meals and wasteful packaging. This wasn't merely poor customer service, it was a volatile situation ready to ignite. "I'll handle it," Claire said briskly as she rose and signaled her assistant. "Is he still at the gate?" "Yes, calm but clearly mishandled," Lily replied. Without missing a beat, Claire gathered her things and called for Jack Robinson from Brand Protection to join her. Meanwhile, back in Baltimore during a working lunch, the phone rang for Jack Robinson. "Jack," he answered. "Jack, it's Lily. Marcus is being held up at the gate. Our airline staff reported him without cause." Jack nearly dropped his fork. "You're kidding." "No, he made the call himself." Jack quickly pushed away from the table. "I'm calling Claire now. You might want to get the legal team ready, just in case." He ended the call and started dialing. At gate 17, Rachel began to sweat. She could feel the situation shifting, not only because Mia had gone quiet, but also because passengers were now openly murmuring about the delay. People were pulling out their phones to check the flight status, which still read as delayed. Then, without warning, a sharply dressed man with a Skywave badge strode up to the gate, trailed by a woman in red heels whose phone was glued to her ear. "Claire," the woman said as she ended her call, surveying the scene. Marcus didn't move. He simply watched her approach. With calm determination, Claire extended her hand. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Claire Reynolds, Executive Director of Regional Operations. May I speak with you privately?" Marcus gave a slight nod, finally putting his phone away. "Of course." They stepped aside to talk, their conversation just loud enough for anyone near the gate to sense that something significant was happening. Meanwhile, Rachel hovered behind the counter, uncertain whether to follow or disappear. Claire took a deep breath. "Mr. Donovan, on behalf of Skywave, please accept our apologies. I've already called an internal review. This shouldn't have happened. I'd like to escort you aboard personally." Marcus didn't react with anger. He simply asked, "Do you recall which seat I had?" She checked her tablet. "Seat 1A. A slight smile played on his lips. "First row. Interesting. I was told that this line is strictly for premium passengers." Claire didn't miss a beat. "Once again, I apologize." Marcus leaned in slightly. "The issue isn't the error, Ms. Reynolds. It's the assumptions behind it." She swallowed, understanding without needing to push further. Marcus wasn't seeking retribution. He was after the truth. Back at the counter, Mia whispered to Rachel, "Don't you realize who he is? He's Marcus Donovan. I saw his company's name on last week's supplier list, the contract with Skywave," Mia explained. Rachel's heart sank as she glanced back at Marcus, still composed, still holding his ticket, without a trace of anger or confrontation. "Maybe we should just let him board now," Mia suggested softly. But Rachel trembled. "No, if we do that right now, it looks like we—" She was cut off by a voice coming through her headset. "Rachel, give me a status on the hold at gate 17. The display now shows delay." She froze. "I'm handling a passenger issue. It's under control." Yet the supervisor's tone left no doubt. "Make sure it stays under control. We've got top executives flying this morning. No surprises." Meanwhile, as Claire guided Marcus away, Jack Robinson was already on the phone back in Baltimore, preparing for any potential fallout. If the incident went public, it could unravel months of work on their new campaign launch. Press releases were in the pipeline, and promotional videos were being finalized. Marcus Donovan was slated to be the face of Fresh Flightfall, an initiative showcasing modern sustainable food. Now his calm demeanor at a boarding gate threatened to overshadow everything. Inside the aircraft, as Marcus finally boarded, the standard robotic smiles were replaced with a subdued air of contrition. A flight attendant named Jordan offered to take his garment bag, while another quickly handed him a bottle of water without even asking. "Mr. Donovan, if you need anything before takeoff, please let me know," Jordan said softly. Marcus made eye contact just once, acknowledging her with a slight smile. Human, genuine, without any show. "Thank you." Back on the ground, an unusual scene unfolded. Gate 17's status changed from boarding to delay, and within the next 10 minutes, 2 other nearby gates displayed the same status. A man in a grey blazer pounded on the counter at gate 18, only to be told that they were undergoing an internal system review. It wasn't just Marcus's flight. Across the terminal, 3 other departures from Skywave were delayed, with vague explanations about operational holds and technical coordination. In reality, management had ordered a quiet pause, a discreet stop, until the issue could be thoroughly assessed by reviewing gate logs, employee notes, and internal communications. Every crew member who had come into direct contact with Marcus was being interviewed. No one would dare mention it publicly, but everyone knew that the flight wouldn't depart until the damage could be fully evaluated. Later, back inside the cabin, Marcus settled into his seat 1A, closing his eyes as he listened to the aircraft's engines. Occasionally, Jordan returned with a quiet update. "Mr. Donovan, we've been asked to delay takeoff briefly. They're working on something with the ground team. We'll keep you informed." Marcus nodded, and Jordan added quietly, "I mentioned to my younger brother about your speech at last year's summit on sustainable farming. He's studying agronomy, and he said your words really resonated with him." Marcus looked toward her, a faint smile crossing his face. "Thank you," he replied. Somewhere near the cockpit, the pilots discussed with a senior crew member in hushed tones near the front, their conversation barely audible, but enough for Marcus to catch. "They're holding the plane. No one knows how long it will be." In the back of the plane, a man grumbled, "Figures, this airline just can't get it together." Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he leaned back and watched the clouds drift by out the window, remembering his father, Robert, who'd once been fired from a car repair shop because his boss claimed he didn't look the part. He recalled his very first investment meeting in Baltimore, where someone had treated him like a valet, and after all these years, it still happened, only now at a higher altitude. Eventually, an internal report reached Claire's office. The gate logs were clear, with no threats or disruptions recorded. The only irregularity was one undocumented call from the gate agent to security. That alone was deemed significant. Just as the plane began to taxi, Rachel had been quietly pulled away from her post, without any announcement or fuss. Her name was removed from the next day's schedule. Later that afternoon, a photo circulated online showing Marcus standing calmly near the gate, phone pressed to his ear, with a caption stating, "He didn't raise his voice, he didn't make a scene, but the entire airport listened." Yet stories like this don't always end as expected. The airplane eventually landed in San Francisco a little after 1:15 in the afternoon local time. Marcus was among the last to disembark, taking his time while other passengers hurried for their rides, luggage, and connections. He checked his phone only once more as he climbed into a sleek black sedan bound for a Marriott, where the West Sustainability in Food Summit was well underway. Notifications piled up, emails from Skywave, a text from Lily informing him that the legal team had contacted him with a draft letter, and a link to a local news blog that had captured the JFK incident. Nothing explosive, nothing viral. Just a calm ripple moving among the well-connected circles. In the conference hall, the atmosphere buzzed with business chatter. Marcus entered quietly at first, but as he approached the side of the stage where his speech was scheduled, a few attendees began to recognize him. He exchanged brief greetings, shook a few hands, with no mention of the airport incident, no sympathy, just business as usual. About 20 minutes later, Marcus took the stage in front of an audience of business leaders, suppliers, academics, and logistics experts. His speech wasn't about what had happened at Gate 17, not directly. It was about resilience in the food supply chain and how minor oversights in procurement, storage, or delivery could lead to major consequences. He recounted the story of a beet farmer from rural Maryland who nearly lost his crop over one missed email, a single error that triggered a thorough revamp of his company's communication systems. Then, pausing to look across the room, Marcus said, "Sometimes the problem isn't the system. Sometimes it's the shortcuts we take in reading people." There was a moment of thoughtful silence, followed by quiet, genuine applause. As he stepped down from the stage, a man from a distribution company in Seattle approached him and said, What you said about shortcuts touched me more than I expected. Marcus simply smiled and replied, "That's exactly where it all starts, when we take shortcuts." Back in New York, Claire Reynolds sat in her office reviewing the internal audit report. Rachel's file had been flagged, but Marcus hadn't demanded her dismissal. He hadn't even requested a public apology letter, and he didn't need one. The senior management at Skywave knew exactly what had transpired and understood just how close they had come to losing a vital contract. In the following weeks, Skywave quietly announced a new partnership with a civil rights consultancy focused on workplace sensitivity and bias prevention. Some media outlets made connections. Marcus's name was indirectly mentioned in a statement by a company spokesperson. "Recent events have reminded us of the work we still must do." Marcus offered no comment, made no posts, and didn't retweet anything. He simply returned to work, and when Lily asked him if he wanted to speak to the press after a business magazine requested an interview, he said, "Tell them I'm busy feeding people." As months passed, the story lingered, not because it exploded online, but because those who had been in the terminal that morning shared it at dinner parties, in hushed conversations among airline staff, and even in boardroom presentations on quiet leadership. And somewhere in a small town near Baltimore, a former grocery store employee named Karen read the online article, smiled, and said aloud in her kitchen, "That's my son." Sometimes the strongest message you can send is nothing at all. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more tales that truly matter.